Hey folks, I'm Gene Delasalo with Audioholics, and today I'd like to do a video on the best top AV receivers for 2018. This is our 6 picks based on the article that we published a couple of weeks ago on the Audioholics editorial site. Received a ton of traffic, still getting a lot of traffic and comments, so I figured it'd be a good idea to do a video on it here to elaborate on some of the points as to why we chose these receivers. So let me share my screen with you here. And here's the article. If you guys have not seen it yet, I do recommend reading this. And please forgive my voice. I'm battling a really bad cold right now, so it's a struggle for me to be doing this on camera. Anyways, let's start with the Marantz SR8012. That's an 11.2 channel receiver. And what that means is that it not only has 11 channels of processing, but it has 11 channels of amplification, all built into one box. And this is one of the 2 receivers of the 6 that'll actually process Auro 3D, which is a immersive surround format similar to Dolby Atmos and DTS-X. Not quite as popular, but it does have a pretty big following in Europe, and for those that are really into audio, just more the music side than the video side. And I've got about maybe a dozen Auro 3D Blu-rays, and I appreciate the fact that I'll be able to decode them with this receiver. So if that's something you're into, then this is one of 2 options on this list that you should consider. So the SR8012 retails for about $3 grand. It's rated at 140 watts times 11. Now, of course, the 140 watt rating is 2 channels driven, not all channels driven. In fact, I just finished my bench test on this receiver, which I will be doing a video on separately. And you could get a quick sneak peek of the power ratings of what I measured. This is the continuous full power bandwidth, and actually exceeded its 140 watt rating, did about 148 watts. And at 4 ohms, it did 215. With 7 channels driven, it did close to 100 watts at 1% distortion and about 86 watts at 0.1%. So I'll go over more of this in a separate video, but rest assured, this is a pretty powerful receiver for what you're getting. And the one thing I really like about the Marantz and Denon receivers in particular is these guys know how to make a good receiver. They spent years really getting stuff right, like the basics. You know, they get the bass management right. Every time I check their crossover slopes, when I measure them, they're accurate. They also give you multiple subwoofer outputs, and it's not just a single parallel connection to 2. It's an actual independent connection. So you get independent control for channel trim and independent control for delay. It just makes setting up multi-sub a lot easier because you have more adjustability in that. I really appreciate that. The 8012 is built really well. It's kind of a throwback from the flagships from maybe a decade ago, though not quite as powerful as those super receivers from a decade ago. Pretty good though. I mean, in today's day and age with everything shrinking, with adding more features, I think Marantz did a good job of giving you good performance and also giving you the latest features. And this is just a beautiful thing to look at. This receiver has a big toroid transformer at the heart of it, right at the center of it. It's got 2 rows of heat sinks for the power amps. Each of the amplifiers are on their own PWB, and they call it a monolithic construction. And there's actually some benefit to that, and you can see in my crosstalk measurements that this receiver did pretty well in that regard because they had better isolation by doing this. And it's just built really well. And this receiver also has the Odyssey XT32 built in for room correction. It has the Odyssey Editor app, so you can actually go in after you do your room correction and adjust the curve, which I think is really cool. We're going to be doing a video discussing that as well. And it's, of course, has the latest in 4K resolution, HD audio and video. In fact, all of these receivers in this comparison will pass 4K, and it'll do you know, all of the latest HDMI 2.0 and HDCP 2.2. So you get a lot of power here with this receiver, a lot of features. It's got the Denon HEOS built in, so that's that music management system that Denon came up with. Because Marantz and Denon are sister companies, they share technologies. Now the next model is the Denon AVR-X8500H. It is the only receiver in this comparison that'll do 13 channels of processing and amplification. So in this situation, you could run a full 7.1.6 you could have 7 bed channels, 6 height channels, and 2 independent subwoofers, all at the same time, all amplified. All the amplifiers are built into this model. And this is the most powerful receiver out of all of them. It's rated at 150 watts times 13. Based on what I saw with the Marantz, I would say that this receiver has even more capability because it does have a bigger power supply. I think it weighs almost 60 pounds. This is kind of a throwback to what Denon used to build back in the day, back when they had the AVR 5803 and the AVR 5805, which in my opinion, the 5805 was probably the best AV receiver ever made. The thing was a monster. It weighed 100 pounds, had 170 watts times 10, and I had to use a dedicated 20 amp line to run that thing. That thing was a beast. But they don't make receivers like that anymore. But this is the closest you're going to get to that. And the price is pretty reasonable for what you're getting. You're getting, for $4,000, you're actually getting 13 channels of amplification and processing. To get this amount of processing power in separates usually costs you a lot more. I mean, some of the separates models out there now that'll do 16 or 32 channels of processing, those processors are 10, 15 grand alone. So the fact that you're getting beyond 7.1.4 in one box for only 4 grand, that's a pretty compelling argument to make for going back to a receiver and maybe not getting separates if you're looking at doing a really big install while staying on a reasonably good budget and still getting good performance. So Denon is, similar to Marantz. I would imagine the bass management's going to be good on this, just like the Marantz is. It also does the Aura 3D, so you could actually do independent speaker configurations on this model. So you can set up for Aura, which runs height channels and the voice of God. You can have one setting for that, and then you can switch over to your DTS-X and Dolby Atmos speaker configuration. The Denon really gives you a lot of flexibility here in your speaker setups. It's just the most flexible out of all the receivers on this comparison. And we are going to be doing a review on this in the future, so we'll go more into detail on it. Of course, it does have the Denon HEOS, and it has the receiver editor app for Odyssey. So you got a lot of power here. Both this Denon and the Marantz are built at the same Japan factory that the AVR 5805 was made at. So you're getting the best build quality. These are both made in Japan. They're not made in the Philippines like some of the lower end models, or Vietnam. So pretty impressive. But if you want to take things more down basic to a lower level and not get into all the bells and whistles, and you want to save yourself some money, I really like what NAD is doing. They're actually supporting modular upgrades on their receivers, and they've done that with the T777. They recently added Atmos and DTS-X. They've upgraded the HDMI card, so now you can do your latest HD processing on here as well. And this receiver is an honest rating of 140 watts times 2 channels driven and 80 watts all channels driven. NAD is one of the only companies that'll give you that all channels driven rating. And you saw what I showed you with the Marantz, which is rated at basically the same power. You're getting similar power with all channels driven in this NAD, even though it looks less powerful on paper. It's really not. This thing is a beast. You're getting really good power in this receiver. The reason why it's $2,500 and not more like some of the other models is it only has 7 channels of amplification built in. So if you do want to run 7.1.4, you're going to need two channel amplifiers or a 4-channel amplifier or 5-channel amplifier and just use one in idle. You're going to have to add external amplification. And I think that's a good option for someone that has a 5-channel amp laying around the house, not knowing what to do with it. You could either use that 5-channel amp now to power your front speakers and another pair of speakers, or you could just use it to power, your height channels and use the built-in NAD amps for everything else. I think they're giving you a lot of flexibility here. They have a new speaker setup, an speaker IQ setup technology. I have not tested it, but I heard good things about it. See the speaker IQ. They also have Dirac room correction, and that's one of the better room correction systems on the market. It allows you to adjust how much correction you're doing. So you're not just doing full bandwidth correction if you just want to correct the bass. Kind of like the receiver editor app for Odyssey that is now following what Dirac is doing. They're giving you the ability to just room correction at bass frequencies, which we believe, and Harman, the guys at Harman did all the research on, the best kind of room correction you could do is really at low frequency, because that's where it matters most. because the room is what dominates at low frequencies, whereas at high frequencies, it's your speaker that dominates more of how the sound is going to be in your room. So you really want to kind of limit that room correction usually to bass frequencies 300 hertz and below. Dirac allows you to do that. Odyssey allows you to do that. I'm glad to see that these kind of options are coming to the consumer market for people to make that choice. And the NAD, it's arranged a little bit differently than some of the other receivers. They do support S-video, which I'm surprised. Most of the other guys have dropped these legacy connections. You do have component video here as well. I think that's useful to always have component video for older cable boxes if you still run those. I think there's 6 HDMI ins and 2 outs. Some of the other models give you 7 or 8 HDMIs. So you do lose a little bit flexibility here. As far as music management, you get their Bluos system, which is quite good, similar to what Denon's doing with Hios and Yamaha's doing with MusicCast. Anyways, let's go on to the Yamaha AVENTAGE, the RX-A3080. That's the latest receiver from Yamaha. We're big fans of what Yamaha's been doing with the AVENTAGE line. We recently reviewed the Yamaha CX-A5100 processor, and I really enjoyed reviewing that unit. I thought the performance was really good on it. The AVENTAGE line, the flagship receivers have bench tested well in the past for us. This model in particular, it gets you down to a $2,200 price range, which is really good because it's cheaper than the Marantz. It does lose 2 channels of amplification, but it does have the 11 channels of processing. So if you want to add a big hulking 2-channel amplifier to set up to get more power for your fronts, I would do that and get the Yamaha. I think that's a great option. And then you can still do 7.1.4. It does have dual subwoofer outputs that are independent, just like the Denon and Marantz units. So you have independent delays and level settings for those subs. It helps you set up multi-sub easier. Now, the only negative I'd say is I'm not a huge fan of YPOW. I don't believe YPOW does a whole lot of good for bass frequencies, but YPOW does a good job with your setup in terms of levels and distances. And the cool thing about the receiver editor app, what that Yamaha offers, is you could do it through the web. And here I have the CX-A5100. This is my unit I actually have plugged into my reference system. And I could go in and I could edit the PEQ, which I did here for the bass frequencies and stuff. I limited my correction. I did very little above a couple of hundred hertz. That's a cool feature to have. As far as I know, nobody else has given you this kind of receiver editor app built into a web browser like this. I really like this, that Yamaha is doing this, and that kind of levels the playing field, in my opinion, to some extent. The other thing that they're doing is they have this new artificial intelligence system that supposedly optimizes level based on what it's detecting from the movie. It sounds like some type of advanced compressor. I'm not really sure how it works. It sounds pretty cool. You can read about it here. I'm interested in checking it out. We'll probably look at one of these receivers next year. The other thing cool about this Yamaha is it's one of the only ones, as far as I know, that actually gives you a balanced input for your digital sources. That's pretty cool that they give you some balanced connections on a receiver. It's very neatly laid out. As you can see, they do have component video, but no S-video. And they're built well. The Yamaha stuff is built really well. I do like the MusicCast management system. I think it's very competitive to what Denon's doing with the Hios. It does have multi-zone, just like the Denon, just like the Marantz. So if you want to do that, you're able to do an extra 2 zones of audio. And they do their zones of audio digitally, so you don't have to run analog connections to them, which is really useful. And you can get them all synced up, so all your zones of audio are in sync with your main zone, so you don't hear a delay between zones. Because the older receivers, you had delay between zones when you put it on party mode or something. They didn't all sync up. It's nice to see that these receivers have solved that problem, and now you can have a whole party in your house and all the audio synced up. So the next 2 receivers are similar situation as Denon Marantz. Yamaha and Onkyo are now sister companies of each other. Onkyo recently acquired Pioneer. I'm sorry, I think I gaffed and said Denon. but Pioneer and Onkyo are sister companies of each other. And these two models are very similar. They're the Elite SC-LX901 from Pioneer, it's $3,000. And the Onkyo is the TX-RZ3100 for $3,100. These model numbers kill me. Honestly, I don't know what Onkyo and Pioneer are doing with these model numbers, but come on, let's make it a little easier, guys, please. With that being said, these new receivers use they're the only ones in the comparison who use a Class D amplifier, and they use a D3 module. It's their own module. In the past, Pioneer used to use the ICE modules, and the ICE modules were not very ideal for driving low impedance loads. In fact, if you looked at one of our older Pioneer reviews, the SC07 receiver in particular, it basically collapsed in a 4-ohm load above 3 kilohertz. It just couldn't deliver power. There were a lot of limitations. I've heard that Pioneer has overcome that with the D3 module. I have not tested it. I've seen some bench tests on these receivers in the print magazines, but everybody tests at 1 kilohertz, and they missed the problem that I found with the SC07 with the ICE module. So you really need to do full bandwidth testing. I'm going to request one of these models probably next year after I get caught up to see. But I know a lot of users that have the Elite flagship receivers and just love them, and they say that they sound more powerful than they are. They're rated at 140 watts times 11, and since they're Class D, they are more efficient, so you will get more power delivery from them than you would out of conventional receivers that use linear AV amplifiers. And this is an 11.2 channel. I'm assuming the 0.2 means independent subwoofer outputs. I have not confirmed it since I haven't reviewed one of these, but you could run a 7.1.4 speaker configuration. And the Pioneer has their Mackie room correction system. Not a huge fan of that system, to be honest with you. I put it on the same level as Yamaha's YPOW. I do think that Dirac and Odyssey are a little bit better room correction systems, but everybody's always refining their stuff. So, you know, there are people that like this room correction system. More power to them. It's good to have this tool. Whether you use it or not is up to you. But these look like really nice receivers. Onkyo, of course, has their Accu EQ, which is their new room EQ system. I've heard good things about it, haven't tested it. So there's a lot of great models here, guys. All of these receivers are really good. They're giving you the latest codecs. They're giving you the latest in HD audio and video. They're giving you the latest multi-zone, streaming, everything you name it, they have it. You would not be disappointed in choosing any of these models. Of course, they have their strengths and weaknesses, which I noted before in this discussion. So take a look at these receivers. Here they are to see how they look aesthetically. And let me know which is your favorite brand of receiver. And if you've purchased either of these or any of these receivers this year, how you like them, or if you plan on getting one of these receivers in the near future. I'd like to hear back from you and tell me what made you decide on choosing one of these models. And I think that's about it for now, guys. I hope you enjoyed this little comparison video. Please thumb it up, share it, share the wealth. Let me know what else you'd like to cover. If you want me to go over any of our tech articles, this new format I have using the Zoom technology, I can actually interface with you here. Hope you like it. And guys, until next time, keep listening.